I'm actually going to focus primarily on the story of contactless in the UK over the last 10 or so years and its growth. But I will talk specifically about the COVID impact over the last few months. Unfortunately, unlike Rui, we don't have any clear numbers or concrete numbers, I should say, for the UK market yet. That is something we're working on, but I can talk anecdotally about what we're seeing as a result of COVID. So I'll go through a kind of overview of UK consumer payments at the moment, and then a little bit about the history of contactless payments in the UK, and then I'll talk specifically about COVID. So if we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. I think these slides will be coming around afterwards, so don't worry too much about the small detail here, but effectively the graph on your left shows you a very similar story that we're seeing all across Europe, which is the slow decline of cash and the growth of card, and specifically debit card. So the green line there is the growth of debit card from the years 2009 to 2019, and the black line going down is the decline of cash. And then the chart in the middle, you can see there the share of consumer payments, as consumer payments, not all payments, is dominated by debit card now in the UK. So this data is from our 2020 report. We do an annual report based on numbers from our card issuers and our card acquirers, which represents the vast majority of the UK market. So this is 2019 data that was published in our 2020 report back in June. And you can see, as I say there, that debit card is by far the most popular means for consumer payments, followed still by cash. So that is still the second means in terms of volume of payments, although significantly lower in terms of value, as you would expect. On the right there, the pie chart just shows the breakdown of online purchases by sector. So just an interesting reflection on the kind of items that consumers are buying online. Again, similar to Rui, what we're seeing in the UK is a huge increase in online purchasing as a result of COVID. And we're looking at some of the implications of that now. So for example, delayed receipt of goods, what does that mean in terms of consumer protections, especially where retailers might be more likely to become insolvent also as a result of COVID. So there are lots of implications of a growth of online payments, albeit generally speaking, it's been a saving grace for the UK retail market that online payments have grown significantly. It's allowed a lot of retailers to stay in business. Next slide, please. So this slide again just shows you the growth in contactless payments specifically over the last 10 or so years. There was a very slow start to contactless payments in the UK, and I'll come on to that when we go to the next slide. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. This gives you a bit of a history on contactless payments in the UK. So it was launched in 2007 with two different brands, so Visa and MasterCard, starting in London and then taking off in other areas geographically in the UK. The initial launch of contactless was very slow, and we identified subsequently the reasons for this. It wasn't mandated by the card schemes. So unlike chip and pin, which was launched as a sort of joint venture by all three card schemes in the UK and supported by the UK Card Association at the time, that was mandated. Contactless was introduced as a commercial offering, and as a result there was quite a lot of confusion about the purpose of contactless in the UK. There was a lack of customer confidence around using it, so for several years we struggled against largely myths around the use of contactless and potential fraud that could occur on contactless. Actually, fraud on contactless is consistently about 10% of overall card fraud, so it's very low as a payment instrument type. Our predecessor, the UK Cards Association, therefore, took this low growth and decided that we should, in the interest of promoting this very accessible product, take a more proactive approach. So we ran a 2-year program to promote contactless in the UK, and you can see the key things that we did there are on the left of that slide. So we've got stakeholder working groups running with retailers, and then also specifically with 2 environments that we thought would be specifically where contactless would be specifically useful, so public transport and charity, and we ran projects with those 2 cohorts and tried to take into account their specific requirements for contactless. We produced best practice guidance, we did a lot of PR around contactless, and we also increased the contactless limit to £30. So we, at the time it was £20 in the UK, and it was clear that retailers' average basket value was above that, and if we increased to 30 we'd bring in a bigger cohort of retailers. Just a couple of things to say on the contactless transit piece. So you may be aware that TfL, Transport for London, launched contactless cards on their bus network in 2013 and then their underground network in 2014. That was a huge driver for use of contactless in London. And what we did as UK Cards Association was take that model and create it into a much bigger framework that could be used across the UK. And we have subsequently seen a number of bus companies, in fact, about 90% of bus companies in the UK now accept contactless payments alongside cash or even instead of cash. And we've also seen some other conurbations like Manchester, for example, implementing contactless on their metro system and bus system. Equally with the charities, we've seen a great uptake of contactless, replacing the decline in cash in the charity sector, both in sort of imposition POSs within museums, etc., or galleries, but also standalone collection points that volunteers might be using within their fundraising. So if we go to the next slide, please. So as a result of the work that we did, and not just the result of the work that we did as a trade body, but also those sort of specific drivers like the use on public transport, we did see great growth in the years really 2015 up to 2019, the last year. So last 4 years we've seen exponential growth in contactless, and these are some of the parameters that we've got from the last year of contactless. So 1 in 4 consumer payments is now on contactless. That's probably increased over the last 6 months or so. Whereas at the beginning, actually only a few card issuers offer contactless. Now the majority offer contactless. It is still a competitive element to offer a non-contactless card in the UK. So some people still do not want to have a contactless card, and issuers are not compelled to not offer them, but some of them as a competitive offering do offer non-contactless cards. We've done some consumer testing and there's a high level of trust now in contactless. So gone are those early myths, those early concerns around capturing contactless details, for example. And acceptance of contactless has grown hugely as well among retailers. That's been helped partly by the card schemes mandating acceptance. So there was a mandate in 2016 to accept contactless, and then from 2020, January this year, there was a mandate to accept higher value payments, contactless payments as well. So all of those things have helped to drive up the adoption of contactless rapidly over the last few years. And average transaction values are increasing. It was under £10. It's actually gone up during COVID to over £10, but that's a bit of a false number because the number of contactless transactions has gone down, reflecting the lack of face-to-face payments during COVID. If we go to the next slide, please. So again, just a few more parameters on the use of contactless. You can see top left there, the number of higher value payments that are being made in the UK currently. So that's Apple Pay, Google Pay, or a similar mobile enabled EMV payment. Obviously those can go above £30. Limits can be set either by the retailer or the issuer. Typically we see around £250 being the limit imposed. So there's a good frequency of those payments being used. Very strong uptake in transport. So now over 50% of contactless, of all TfL journeys are made using a contactless card. And given that was introduced back in 2014, that's quite a rapid growth among a population of 6 to 7 million in London. So that has overtaken the proprietary card that TfL have, the Oyster card, and also cash. So cash has massively reduced in usage in TfL. And then you can see on the top right there, the different sectors that contactless is used in, which is interesting, including other travel like airline. And again, you know, that's been significantly promoted. Contactless has been significantly promoted during COVID as a cleaner, if you like, form of payment, although the World Health Organization has been very clear that there shouldn't be any added risk of contagion using cash versus card. But nonetheless, that consumer concern has existed and has pushed, and retailer concern, and has pushed the use of contactless in the UK. I've mentioned the low levels of contactless fraud there on the bottom left. And we also in our sort of reporting do plot forward predicted growth. So again, that was our prediction as of the end of last year. It may be that we have an even higher prediction now based on the changes from COVID. So if we go to the next slide, please. Just quickly, this covers the demographic trends that we see in the UK on the use of contactless. So broadly speaking, London used to be the hotspot for contactless, but now it's a pretty even spread among the UK regions. And interestingly, the top left graph there is proportion of people using contactless. Actually, the discrepancy between the different age groups is not great. So there is a very good uptake in the older generations, for example, which sometimes is not as expected. And then if we go to the final slide, please, this is really the slide on the impact of COVID on contactless. So similar to Portugal and indeed a lot of the European countries, we work together with the card schemes and issuers and acquirers to raise and retailers to raise the contactless limit from £30 to £45. So €50 is the regulatory cap imposed by strong customer authentication across Europe. So that's equivalent for us of £45, or was at the time, starting from the 1st of April. And we've seen a very high percentage of rollout in the UK among retailers. That a very rapid adoption was supported by card scheme mandates, requiring the adoption of a higher contactless limit rate. But because we were pushing it through so quickly, there's been some leniency around retailers, especially those who are still not open in the UK. So a number of retailers reopened in July with changes in government regulations, and they have all been slowly adopting the higher contactless banding. In terms of communications, we work very closely with the British Retail Consortium, which represents the largest retailers in the UK, and then also a number of other smaller trade bodies representing retailers. And we worked with the card schemes to ensure that there was good signage and collateral available for use at POS, use in the shops, and supermarkets, certainly in the UK, did a lot of promotion about that higher limit. Again, a number of them refused to take cash during the COVID lockdown and are still doing so. So they were very much pushing the contactless acceptance. Finally, just to say anecdotally, we don't have hard data on this yet, but anecdotally, over 50% of card transactions in the 30 to 45 band are now on contactless. So that's incredibly quick adoption rate for a contactless limit change. Again, anticipated because of the COVID desire to limit contagion at POS, both by using chip and pin or by using cash with the till. And we've done a little bit of consumer testing, and it's tested very positively in terms of the change. We are now looking in the UK market at whether there will be appetite for another change. So as you all know, we are leaving Europe at the end of this year. That does allow us to flex the upper limit. We won't be constrained by the strong customer authentication limit of 50 euros anymore. So it does mean that we have the flexibility to increase our limit again. And that is something we will be actively considering with the industry over the coming months. So I'll stop there for any questions, and then of course I can cover more questions under the panel session.